Welcome to the weekly swing low. It's May 11th, 2025. And we're going to start with Bitcoin today because it looks like Bitcoin is making its run into its long-term cycle top. So this is month 30. The previous cycle topped in on month 35. Let's just start there. We're looking at a monthly chart here. You can see this was our low here back in November 2022. We had an inside month the following month, that December. Pretty ugly candle too. Look at that, a red shooter. Then January, you had this big move up. Once you crossed above this high here, so that is 18,385, and you were just off to the races. So that has lasted 30 months. This is month 30. We're about to retest this all-time high we made here. I suspect we go into price discovery, and if previous cycles are similar, that means we have another 5, 6 months maybe. Maybe this is a slightly longer one, right? This was 35 months. The one before that was actually also 35. I don't think it makes sense to assume these things are going to be exactly the same timing, but it just tells you basically this thing could run for most of the rest of 2025, but you have to be prepared to take profits on that big swing high. I just suspect that big swing high is going to be much higher from here. So if you zoom in on the weekly, we are just completing week 4. So you can see this is the week that marked the low. And you can see this cycle here, basically from low to low, was 35 weeks. So this is your weekly candle now. We topped on week, what is that? Week 24. So we're now 4 weeks in. So we could run, again, think about this as, it's a good question. Like, right, you could easily see a world where this weekly cycle is the top, right? Like we run for, call it 16 weeks. So another 3 months. That's not a prediction, but that's something that you want to watch for. But this is a high probability trade to the upside. And so I want a piece of that in large size. Last thing I'll show you before we talk about tactical levels. Look at this monthly chart, right? Again, all the same signs. We rally. I'll take off the right. You have this red year, and then we rally for 3 years. Red year, we're doing the same thing. Theoretically, this candle here, the 2025 candle, fills out. Again, not a prediction, but look what happened to this candle. It filled out, and then what did we get? An upper wick, which means we got to pull back. That was your top, your long-term top. When you look at it on this chart, it doesn't really look like a long-term top. And this is the Coinbase ticker. If we go to something that has more history, it's the same pattern though, right? Like you have this red year, and then you have a few years up, a few red year, a few years up, red year, 3 years up. To be clear, to be exact. So that's what I want to play this to the upside. And if you think about ratios, the other thing to keep in mind, we there was a time when, if you look at this weekly chart, right, for all this period, Bitcoin was being outperformed by the S&P. This is the ratio of Bitcoin to SPY. And so we've been grinding up this whole time. So that's important to note. This is week 10 of the rally for the ratio, not the absolute chart. So that's something that I'm paying attention to. And you want to be in when Bitcoin is outperforming SPY. I mean, that seems like it's kind of an obvious thing to say, but this was your period where you kind of wait. This was your panic, and then boom, up. But again, we're rallying into that long-term cycle top. If you want to call it the 4-year cycle, what it has played out like that's been around the timing. If we think tactically, we look at the 4-hour chart. We're building a little bull flag here, and so you've got a range with a low. Oh, excuse me, that's the ratio. Let's go back to the ticker itself. So you've got a low at 103, $103,070, something in that neighborhood. And then the high, this local high at basically 105,000. So we're kind of ping ponging here. I mean, you can see it, right? Like this, this is forming like a little bit of a little flag, essentially, right? So this is consolidation before the next move up is what I would suspect. But that's your downside move, right? You want to watch that 103 level break of that bull flag. The other thing to point out is that within this context, ETH is starting to outperform as well, actually. So if we go to ETH, so ETH is showing a big, a big swing low on the monthly chart after this waterfall move down. Let's zoom in here. Right, again, looked very ugly versus Bitcoin. And same count for ETH. So week 4. But what's most important for ETH is the ratio of Bitcoin to ETH, of ETH to Bitcoin, I should say. Look at how this thing has been pummeled over the last several years. Look at this monthly chart. I mean, just drooping. Now we have a big swing low on the monthly chart. So this thing has to hold above that, right? And if it can, right, and we've tried before, right? Like we try to swing low here. I mean, this is obviously, much more promising. But if this thing can hold, you have your potential that ETH starts to outperform Bitcoin from here on out. It's been dreadful to own it. So broadly speaking, that's a rally for crypto, but bigger gains for ETH potentially. And for ETH, look at the way the 4-hour chart looks. This is also a little bit of a, so this has been, this is a much clearer, you've got to, oh, sorry, this is the ratio chart. Apologies. The 4-hour chart on ETH, kind of similar to Bitcoin, right? It's a little bull flag. So you're low at 24.36 in that neighborhood. You want to kind of hold that level or catch a false breakdown below that level and a recapture. So ETH is finally waking up. That's very positive. And same applies. Whenever you get that Bitcoin long-term top, you have to imagine ETH is not far behind. Right? Let's move to regular equities, and we're going to move relatively quickly here. So this is SPY, and SPY is on week. Oh well, what do you know, right? Week 4, just like Bitcoin, right? So same count, right? Which makes sense. The markets are moving in lockstep, except Bitcoin is just making gains faster than SPY. And we really didn't go anywhere here, right? So the next real level we need to recapture is this high here at 576. And it makes it very clear, right? We're going to have an inside week to open, right? The range is a high of 570.31 and a low of 556. Right? You can see because of this weekly candle was a doji. The next weekly candle is going to open as an inside candle, and we just want to see which side of the range it breaks. On the daily, what does that mean? So, oh wow, this has just been Chop City, right? So we're on day 23. Very possible that this was your daily cycle high here, right? And so just tactically speaking, below 561.70, below this low, that creates a swing high, right? So that's what you want to watch for. That would be your first sign that, okay, maybe we have a daily cycle low here, or a daily cycle high here, and we're moving into a daily cycle low, which doesn't have to be the end of the world. By all accounts, it should probably end up being a buying opportunity. And this is still your picture on the monthly candle, right? We're just consolidating here. We haven't made that decisive monthly swing low, but that would be the expectation. So that's going to be a similar pattern for all of them. So for the Qs, below 4, so that for the Qs, QQQ below 484.17 would make your daily swing low, daily swing high, excuse me. But importantly for the QQQ, we're actually we have that monthly swing low in place, right? As long as the Qs stay above $479.56, the monthly swing is in place. So if anything, you watch for a move back to that level, a retest of that level, and then hold or break below and a recapture. That's an actionable trade to reload if one is already long or to get long this rally. But this thing is holding right now. That's important to note. So that's QQQ. The Dow still hasn't made that monthly swing low, excuse me. Has to get above the DIA, the ETF has to get above $423.44. And for the Dow, your downside risk level is $411.57. Below that, you have your daily swing your daily swing high. For IWM, that daily swing high comes below 198.26. Still no monthly swing low for that one either. For SMH, your daily swing high comes below 220 and 10 cents. And again, this one notably, just like QQQ, is still a monthly swing low. So that's very bullish. The long term chart is telling you like it's trying to form a bottom here. Has to stay above $216.61. That preserves the monthly swing low, the monthly swing low, which is uber bullish. Okay, we move to Dixie now. So Dixie is trying to put together a little weekly cycle rally. So that low that we got back on week 30, that looks like it was our swing low. It was our daily cycle or weekly cycle low, excuse me. So we just completed week 2, but that's the catch. Even in a downtrend, you're going to have weekly cycle lows. They just end up being short-lived rallies that roll over quickly. So we would expect this to roll over relatively quickly, and that for that we look at the daily cycle to get some clues. So the daily cycle is on day 14. So very likely the top of this daily cycle will also be the top of the weekly cycle as well. And you would imagine we're going to see resistance in this kind of zone here. You see where these wicks were left behind. So call it somewhere around 102 spot 29 if we even make it up there. Like if this thing is going to get anywhere, like make an appreciable higher high, that would probably be your zone of resistance, is my sense. And on the monthly chart, it's still just a big inside weekly candle, or excuse me, an inside monthly candle. It is green to be fair, but it's inside a gigantic red range. So nothing to really do here, kind of no man's land. What about the 10-year Treasury? So the 10-year Treasury, now that is looking much more bullish. So we had our weekly cycle low back at the end of March, and we are now on week 5, and we've just left behind a little higher low here, very bullish. And so the next place you might expect some resistance would be 4.44, right? Like that's this high here. But this thing is rallying in a new weekly cycle. But all of this, to be clear, is still just inside the range of this gigantic candle. So you could see a world where we just fill out this range and then price decides what it wants to do, which could be collapse lower as well. So not something to be over, like we're not out of no man, we're not out of the woods, right? We're kind of in no man's land, but it's leaning bullish at least for the next couple of, at least for the next week, because this is a nice little swing low. So once it broke above 4.33. What about oil? So oil, okay, so oil is trying to put in a bottom here. Look at that. So we had this big low, but like we had this big low, then this rejection, and now we're trying to form a little double bottom here. So that gives you a clear line in the sand, that 55.16 level. Like, you're like below these lows, but more importantly, now we have a potential ceiling here at 65. So if this thing can break back above 65, that tells you this low is maybe real, and we could at least kind of retest up here. So that's oil. What about TLT? Where are we at with this one? So TLT. So TLT looks like it's declining in a weekly cycle. So topped out on week 11. So now this is week 16 after the top on week 11. Okay. But at the same time, we're really just inside this gigantic range. You can see the last 4 weeks have just been inside. So that range is a high of basically $90 and a low of 85.67. And that means TBT is also kind of in no man's land. Well, this is showing a similar pattern to the 10-year, which makes sense. So for TBT, you could play a low below 35.33 as your stop. So we talked about crypto already. Okay, let's close out with gold and precious metals. So it looks like we made a weekly cycle high here, week 16, I believe it was, right? But That doesn't mean we have to have a really steep decline, right? This thing could just as easily, yeah, that's week 16, 17, 18. So we just closed out week 18. Based on the way this candle formed, it's going to be an inside candle, most likely. That opens next week. The range is a high of 34.38 and a low of 32.37. So that's your kind of zone of play. And if you think about where we look out, how we look on the daily cycle, what you'd be hoping for is this is some kind of little daily cycle low and we've started a rally versus this being a back test of this high and we're just continuing the daily cycle decline from this high here. Can't say for sure now. What you can say is that this candle here is your first kind of line in the sand. So below 32.75 basically is would a break below that is further evidence that this is just a lower high to this and we're continuing this decline and that you would expect we'd break below this low. Not saying we get down here, but at least we test something like this. But bigger picture, similar to Bitcoin, on this long-term chart, we're still rallying from this long-term low. So, excuse me, the low was in September. And so this is currently month 32. And generally these things top around like in the mid 30s, high 30s. So we could see a world where Bitcoin and gold actually just rally together into the end of the year and then they top, right? Maybe not at the same time, but each is going to have its long-term top at some point. And it looks like they're both kind of rallying into that together, which is really interesting. Let's look at silver and then we'll close out with the miners and a quick look at natural gas. So for silver, that candle is a high of 33.26 and a low of 31.98, right? That's your similar equivalent on the weekly chart. At this point, this thing is really gonna move. Like you're looking at gold for your cues at this point, right? Like gold is either gonna drag it up as we go into the 8-year cycle, which is what I would suspect. This thing is just trading a little erratically right now, though. And if we look at the miners, so the miners actually, that's interesting. Much more positive look. Look at this weekly candle, kind of a similar pattern to the 10-year treasury actually. Look at this little low it left behind. So that's a pretty actionable signal. So that leaves a low below here, below 46.73. So you could play that. But again, gold is gonna these things are gonna be pulled by gold's gravity essentially. And let's see what's happening with natural gas. Okay, so natural gas looks like it did make a weekly cycle low. We made another slight higher high here on this weekly cycle, or in on the weekly chart. But more importantly, on the daily, it's day 11. So still plenty of time to rally, even if this weekly cycle is going to be something that's left translated. You could see a world where we rally back to this like congestion zone, so back to like around $4, which is still pretty good upside from here. So that's natural gas, and we'll close it out here. Thank you for watching.